Hey, hey, history besties! Welcome back to Miss F Spills the Tea. Today, we're diving into one of the most scandalous, revolutionary moments in American history, the women's suffrage movement. We're spilling all the tea on how a group of bold, fierce women demanded their right to vote and changed the course of history. From dramatic conventions to illegal voting and even hunger strikes, this story has it all. It's 1848 in Seneca Falls, New York. Hot, humid, and about to get spicy. Why? Because Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott are hosting the first ever women's rights convention. They called it the Seneca Falls Convention, and it was the event that ignited the women's suffrage movement in America. Here's the tea. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was fed up. She was tired of being told to sit down and be quiet because she was a woman. The last straw, she and Lucretia were denied seats at the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London. Can you imagine? So she did what any queen would do. She rewrote the rules, literally. The Declaration of Sentiments demanded equal rights for women, including the right to vote. It was bold, it was scandalous, and not everyone was sipping the tea she was pouring. Even Lucretia Mott thought it was a step too far, but then Frederick Douglass himself stood up and gave a speech so fiery it could have set the room ablaze. Right is of no sex, truth is of no color, he declared. And just like that, the resolution for women's suffrage passed. Fast forward a few years, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton teams up with Susan B. Anthony, the OG troublemaker. While Stanton wrote the speeches, Susan delivered them with fire and fury. She organized protests, made speeches, and even got herself arrested for voting illegally. Oh yeah, you heard that right. In 1872, Susan B. Anthony walked into a polling station and cast her ballot like she owned the place. Of course, the authorities were not having it. She was arrested, tried, and fined $100, which she proudly refused to pay. She said, "Resistance to tyranny is obedience to God." I mean, can you say iconic? But here's where the tea gets messy. When the 15th Amendment was passed after the Civil War, giving black men the right to vote but excluding women, the suffrage movement split in two. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were furious, and they formed the National Woman Suffrage Association, or the NWSA, demanding a constitutional amendment. Meanwhile, Lucy Stone led the American Woman Suffrage Association, or the AWSA, taking a more moderate, state-by-state approach. The drama was real, y'all. Meanwhile, states were starting to grant women the vote. Shout out to Wyoming out there in the West for being the first in 1869. But the real game changer was Alice Paul, who brought British suffrage tactics to America. Alice was bold, unbothered, and unafraid to go to jail for her cause. She picketed the White House, went on a hunger strike, and when they force-fed her, the scandal hit headlines nationwide. Public sympathy surged, and President Woodrow Wilson had no choice but to support the suffrage amendment. Finally, in 1920, after decades of protest, arrest, and sheer determination, the 19th Amendment was ratified. Women could finally vote. It was a victory worth every ounce of struggle, and we owe it to the fierce, fabulous women who refused to back down. But wait, before you think everyone was ready to pass the tea to the ladies, let's talk about the drama from the opposition. Oh yes, not everyone was on board with women getting the vote, and the reasons? Oh, they're wild. There was three main groups that were totally against it. Politicians, business leaders, and even some women. That's right. There were women who were anti-suffrage. Talk about internalized patriarchy. First up, the politicians. They were worried that if women started voting, they might actually, vote them out of office. Many politicians opposed suffrage because they feared women would push for social reforms like child labor laws and temperance and better working conditions. Heaven forbid. Then there were the business leaders, especially those who owned factories and big businesses. They were afraid that women would demand better working conditions and fair wages, things that would cost them money. Basically, they didn't want to lose their cheap labor. And finally, believe it or not, there were anti-suffrage women who argued that voting was unladylike and that politics would corrupt women's morals. They worried that women voting would destroy traditional family roles. They even went so far to say that if women got involved in politics, men would abandon their roles as head of households. Yeah, the logic was as twisted as that slice of lemon in your tea, honey. These anti-suffrage groups were vocal and well organized. They held rallies, published newspapers like the Remonstrance, and even lobbied politicians to vote against women's suffrage. They truly believed that giving women the vote would ruin society as they knew it. But despite the haters, the suffragettes didn't back down. They faced ridicule, threats, and even violence, but they kept marching forward, and honestly, that just makes their victory even more epic. So, next time you step into a voting booth, remember the tea that was spilled to make it possible. These women didn't just break the glass ceiling, they shattered it. And that's the full spill on the women's suffrage movement. Who's your favorite suffragette? Were you surprised by Susan B. Anthony's rebellious side? Drop a comment and join the conversation. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Until next time, keep sipping that tea and maybe some lemonade because this story was both bitter and sweet. Bye!